A little over 2 years ago, I did something extremely drastic and I quit my 9 to 5 job and opened up a small business. I didn't have that much of a plan. I didn't really have a backup and I really didn't know what was going to come next. But I did have this feeling that something had to change. I was tired of surviving a job that was draining me. I was tired of just being unhappy with my life at the time. So I walked away. And then what followed can only be described as the most chaotic and intense times of my life. There were months I wasn't sure I was going to make it. There were days that I wanted to disappear. The stress was unbearable. But in the middle of all of that mess, I stumbled across something magical. And when I say magical, I mean literally it was a magic potion. It was something that started out as a craft project, something to kind of just get my mind off of everything that was going on. But that craft project turned into a spark, and that spark became the foundation for my handmade fantasy business. This is the story of how I turned the lowest, most uncertain time of my life into a handmade business. And for those of you who don't know me, hello, my name's Christina. I am the artist and owner of Goose Devil Collections. I'm a small handmade business that specializes in fantasy decor. So before I became a small business owner, I was working in higher education. And I did this for over 7 years, and I had a career that looked really good on paper. And it was something that I honestly thought I'd stay at until the day I retired. But I got to a point where I was so stressed out in that job that it physically made me sick every day going in. I was exhausted all the time. I was anxious. I'd cry before going to work or before going into a meeting. And my body was just screaming at me that I had to get out of there. And it was because the environment was so toxic in the department I worked for. And I would honestly say the behind the scenes of higher education can be quite toxic, but we're not going to get into that right now. And honestly, I worked with some amazing people, but the leadership was extremely difficult to deal with. And eventually I just broke. So I did what most burnt out millennials who are facing a quarter life crisis do, and I decided to quit. I walked away from a career that I'd put a lot of time and effort into, and I didn't really have a safety net. I didn't really have a niche. I knew that I could make money because at the time I was doing reselling and that was going well, but it wasn't something I wanted to do long term. But it did show me that I could be my own boss, and that was something that I might want to start doing. So I opened an Etsy shop and I told myself, okay, let's see what happens. And before I go further, I want to give a caveat that I understand that I am very, very fortunate that I could even quit my job. Most people do not have that option. I have a partner that is able to support us, and even that's been a struggle sometimes. We'll get to that later. But I just want to say that this is my story. I wouldn't necessarily use it as a guide if you are wanting to start your small business, but I finally want to be able to tell my story and tell how I got to this point in my handmade business. Okay, so where were we? I quit. And I did put in my 2 weeks notice. I didn't just like walk off, but I did say goodbye to that part of my life. And so the same week that I quit, my partner ended up getting laid off. I remember the sinking feeling in my chest, like the rug was being pulled out from under me. And thankfully, we had savings so we could go for a very short amount of time without us both being employed, but it was fucking scary. He was able to get another job fairly quickly, but it was almost like the universe was telling me this path I'd chosen, it wasn't going to be easy. And to be honest, I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I did not know running a small business was going to be so hard. So when I started on Etsy, I fell into the trend at the time, which was get a Cricut, get an Etsy, and sell handmade stickers. So I watched endless tutorials that made it look effortless. I got a Cricut, I got sticker paper, but I very quickly realized it was not going to be that easy. Making stickers at home was very hard, and what I was making, I didn't really enjoy it, and I didn't really enjoy the designs I was creating. Every product felt forced. And when you don't love what you're creating, it's very hard to convince other people to love it. So my Etsy shop is open. I don't think I mentioned, this is 2023 when I opened up my Etsy shop. And it was up for a couple of months. I wasn't getting really any sales. The only people who had purchased something from me were like close friends. And it was very disheartening. But it was also even harder because I didn't really like what I was putting out there. And so one day, me and my partner are talking, and he is really into Dungeons and Dragons. And he was like, well, why don't you make something that is about D&D? And so I gave it a shot, and I started with creating D&D mystery loot, and that went over very well, and that led to me making our dice scoops. And those two things are our best seller to this day. And it came out of just like a conversation where I had admitted that I wasn't really feeling like I was doing something that I like doing. And so we get the D&D stuff out there, and it starts doing well. The holiday season is coming up, and I was really excited because I kind of found a niche that made sense for me, and we were really enjoying ourselves. But just as things were starting to feel like they were clicking for me, life decided to throw us several curveballs. And this is the reason why I really didn't want to make this video, because I do want to share my journey. But in 2023 and 2024, a lot of really intense and hard things happened to us. So if I get a little, I don't know if I'm going to cry. But I'm not, it's not to try to garner sympathy. I'm here to try to tell you what happened and how my small business kind of helped me get through it. So at the end of 2023, we found out that our rent was increasing and we were going to have to move before the end of the year. And that was something that we had not planned for at all. Around the same time, our dog, Atwood, was diagnosed with kidney failure. And the vet gave us a few weeks to make one of the hardest decisions we ever had to make, which was, he was suffering. And so he was going to have to be, I don't want to go into it. And then at the same exact time, a close family friend who had been battling with some very serious health issues, we found out was going to be going into hospice. And all of that happened over the span of like a month or two. And all of this was around the same time we're getting into the holidays and the holiday rush, and my Etsy shop is starting to take off. We're getting more orders than we ever had, and business was picking up, but I had to pause everything because mentally and emotionally and physically, I had nothing left. I didn't shut my Etsy down, but I did take down my best-selling items because I got to a point where I just did not have the time or the energy to fulfill orders. And this was really hard because on top of all the terrible things that were happening, it felt like I had finally figured it out. I had taken like 5 steps forwards to be just not 10 steps back. And it did make me doubt, like, was it worth it? Was I gonna have to give up on my dream? We barely got through 2023. It ended with a lot of heartache. And in the beginning of 2024, we were hit with more unfortunate news. My father-in-law was diagnosed with cancer, and we ended up losing him later that year. And that kind of grief changes you. On top of everyone else we had lost, we were losing someone else. And that was just very hard to handle. It made everything I had been building and my dreams feel a lot smaller. And because of all the stress, I ended up spiraling. I got burnt out. There were days that I couldn't get out of bed. All I would do was scroll social media and compare myself to other businesses, wondering why I wasn't enough, why they could do it and I couldn't. I felt like a failure, and I was ready to look for another job and to give up on my dreams. Then one day I made a potion bottle. And I know that sounds weird, but I had seen a craft on Pinterest or TikTok or something where somebody was making a potion for their home decor. And so I made one. It was a little craft to distract myself, and honestly something to kind of get my creative juices flowing, because at that point I was about ready to give up. So I filled this bottle up with water and old eyeshadow and like food coloring, and I saw it change color before my eyes. Something just kind of unlocked in me. This silly little potion brought back this sense of whimsy and fun, and I realized that magic doesn't just have to be something in books or movies. It can be in real life, and I can bring it to the real world with my own hands. That little moment, it was more than just like a craft project. It honestly made me realize why I quit my 9 to 5, because I was looking for something fantastical. I was looking for something magical, and I do have the capacity to make that happen. And that potion just gave me a reason to keep going. And so that potion led to another, which led to another. There was a lot of trial and error, a lot of trying to figure out how to even make these things, because there's not a lot of YouTubes or TikToks about how to make color changing potions, but I loved it. I loved coming up with all these creations, these different colors, the different textures. I enjoyed it so much. And so this then became the heart of Goose Devil Collections. And so it turned into this weird little fantasy brand born out of the messiest season of my life. And I leaned into it fully. I started making beautiful color changing potions, creepy apothecary jars. And a little while later, I ended up learning that I really enjoy miniature. So I started making like magical miniature mini potions. And people started responding. I started getting a lot more comments and a lot more people reaching out to me and asking me how they did this, what I used, and starting to build a tiny itsy bitsy community where I would encourage people like, hey, you can do this in your home too. I found, and am still finding, these little pockets of people who just love the idea of magic and having it in your home. I am a huge fantasy lover. I felt like when I started with the potions, they worked with the D&D stuff as well. And my husband is a very big fantasy lover. We're also very big horror lovers, magic lovers. So that's where all these different ideas that I've come up with, they come from folklore and music and movies and D&D and books. And so it's so much to pull from that sometimes it's a little overwhelming to even make a new potion or have a new idea, because I come across so much magical stuff, even in the everyday world, like not even based on like anything, just even the magic of walking in the woods, and how could you bottle that, and how could you make something that makes you feel more magical in your own home. For a while with my business, and I've only had it for, like I said, a little under 2 years now, I was very afraid of showing up and showing my face and talking to the camera. Mainly because I didn't want to be seen, because I didn't want people to view me as a failure, because I was not as far along in my career as I thought. I wanted to be seen as successful and seen as, a certain thing, and it kept me from showing myself and showing up. And I realized that a lot of it too had to deal with the heartache that was a prominent part of my business, just from everything we went through in the very early days. Having a small business has been one of the most rewarding things, as well as one of the hardest things I've ever had the pleasure of doing, with every kind message, with every order, with every kind comment, with every question. It has helped me feel more grounded. It has helped me find more of a community. And I realized that success is measured very differently for different people. I'm doing better than I did last year. And so that is how I define my success. And I need to be proud of how far I've come, especially given how much I've gone through. And again, that's why I'm making this video. Sometimes you go through life and you get through it, and you don't always look back and reflect on it and how much you've had to overcome. And so I started celebrating the little things. I've not gone viral, and I don't want to. I realized that about myself. But what I do want is to make magical things, share them with people, and show people how they can bring more magic into their everyday lives. Goose Devil Collections is still growing. Some days are very hard and some days are amazing, but I'm not hiding any of that anymore. With this channel, I want to show a realistic, like, behind the scenes of someone who is like in the shit trying to have a small business, grow a small business, who's not getting success overnight, who's not seeing, $100,000 in sales. I'm proud that I didn't give up. And I don't know what the title of this video is going to be. And if I end up making it, because one of the ideas is like, did I make a mistake? I don't think I did, because as hard as it has been, at least I have lived my authentic self. I don't struggle to get up in the morning every day and to find a reason to get out of bed anymore. So if you're in the middle of building something, know that I see you. And I understand it is hard. And if you've ever wanted a different life, I hope this video shows you that it can be possible. I wouldn't necessarily do it the way that I did it, but it's okay to have a dream, and it's okay to plan to pursue that dream. Sometimes all it takes is the tiniest spark and a little bit of courage to build something incredible. So like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share your story with me, your small business story, or share your small business dreams. I would genuinely love to hear it. And thank you for being here. Let's keep making magic. Stay magical.